You are listening to the Bo and Luke Show, you lucky dogs. I'm Luke Carrington, your co-host.
And I'm your other co-host, Bo Bravo. Hey, listen, folks, today we have an amazing guest, Tony Estese. He's a former U.S. Army soldier. He's a model. Guy's kind of handsome, I think. He's an actor. He's a movie producer. He's a writer. He just wrote his very first screenplay manuscript. He actually shared a copy with me. I'm reading through it. It's amazing. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing movie. You know, Tony, Luke, this guy knows how to get after it. So when we recorded this and you listen to Tony, he's just never stops, right?
Yep.
That was the feeling I got. Just go, 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 right?
Yep. 100%.
Every opportunity, seeking out, going after the players in the game and in the industry. It just never quit. I love it.
Asking. That's right.
Yeah. Ask. So listen, folks. Yeah, that is the key. Hey, I hope you love the episode. Listen to all Tony has to say. Give us feedback. You can find us on the web at theboandlukeshow.com. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Everything is the Bo and Luke Show. So you just put that in there and you'll find out on all of our platforms. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Those are our main platforms. So go out there and listen in, subscribe if you will, and feedback. We love your feedback.
That's right. If you want to be a guest, go to theboandlukeshow.com and fill out a form. We would love to have you on. And per this podcast, all you have to do is ask.
That's right.
And be really interesting.
That too. Now let's get after it.
Let's do it.
Mr. Tony Estese, tell us and tell our listeners, whom we call the Bo and Luke Nation, who you are, where it's a loaded question, and we'll get into a lot of it. But where you grew up, how you started. We'll get into your whole life story, where you are today.
All right.
Yeah, because it's an amazing journey, and I know you have a lot to share, and it'll be incredibly inspirational to all kinds of people listening, and how to really go after their dreams and keep at it, right. Which is what I think you're doing, and you've been doing for a very long time. Right. And that's inspirational. You never give up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's about tenacity always.
Yeah. So where'd you grow up?
So I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I grew up on a mix of south side of Chicago and northwest suburbs. So up until the 6th grade, primarily, I lived on the south side of Chicago. My mom got remarried when I was in 6th grade. My dad passed away when I was very young. Oh, wow. And we moved to a suburb of Chicago. And the difference was night and day in upbringing. Was
it really?
Yeah. Vast disparity, economic disparity. It's funny. I have a picture from when I was my first day of kindergarten, and that school on the south side of Chicago. The thing that strikes me the most about that picture was you'll see me standing by the door about to open the door, and the door is trash. It's it's a metal green door, but most of the paint is chipped off of it. It just looks horrible. You can tell you're in an impoverished neighborhood. It's really crazy.
Wow. And not that Tony. Way. Go ahead.
I lived in Chicago for a long time.
Uh-huh.
What neighborhoods are we talking about?
So I grew up in the West Pullman neighborhood primarily.
Sure.
Yeah,
I know West Pullman.
Deep South. I grew up on 117th and Wallace.
Yeah. I know right where you're talking about. I sure do. And what suburb did you move to?
Palatine.
That's a huge difference, Tony. You weren't messing around.
Right.
Wow.
And the geography of the area, they're really very far away from each other as far as that goes. But, definitely on a socioeconomic scale, a lot further apart. Yeah,
that sure is. That helps paint a picture.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. So what did you do after high school?
Okay.
What took you?
It's complicated. My senior year in high school, I actually moved to Milwaukee, and I actually graduated high school up in Milwaukee. And so shortly after high school, my first job graduating high school, my summer job was working for a landscaping company. And that landscaping company, that was like such a tough job. I remember my very first day of working, they had me shoveling like a ton worth of dirt into a wheelbarrow and taking it from the front lawn to the back lawn. And, so for 2 days, I remember my hands being so calloused, me being exhausted. And then they had us working, like my third day, I was working at some home that was on the lakefront that had this little bluff like overlooking the lake. And I had to carry railroad ties down that bluff and like install them as a barrier like for the dirt. It was just really intense, hard work. And that summer I was like, I'm not doing this. Like I'm not doing this manual labor like this. I worked the entire summer until the season was over. And from there, then I went into retail sales. I was working for, I don't know if you guys remember, a store back in the 80s called Merry Go Round.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I
weren't they purveyors of parachute pants?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of parachute pants, and then as the fashion progressed, you got the get used ripped jeans and the whole.
Oh yeah.
And we went into hammer pants, the whole like every awful 80s fashion, we had it. Wow. So yeah, I sold clothes there for several years. I started in sales. After 9 months, they promoted me to assistant manager of the busiest store in Milwaukee, in downtown Milwaukee. So did that for a few years and joined the Army in like 1990. So I graduated in 86. So yeah.
Think about that prep though, for like everybody listening. Number one, you couldn't have picked a harder job to learn hard labor, right? Right from the get go. So you're getting that, regardless of it lasting 3 months or whatever. You learned what real hard physical labor type work was, and you're a young guy, and then you go into sales, and that's the people business. So now you know hard labor. You're connecting people. Man, they set you up just right for the Army.
Right, exactly.
What was harder, the manual labor or sales?
Well, see, those are two different types of hard.
Yeah.
Because with sales, I think I just really had to be very tuned in and focused and just trying to read the customer and trying to see what I could use to flip in my advantage whenever somebody walked in. Because merry-go-round was truly a very high-pressure sales environment. But we definitely attacked it from the angle of going at it, fun and flirtatiously, and flirtatious. A heavy ingredient to the success of merry-go-round.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think the guys and gals that work at Men's Warehouse these days, they must have worked at merry-go-round back in the day, because it's the same. They know how to do it though. They make you feel good. You look sharp.
Right.
This shirt goes great. Makes you look even better. Yep. Yeah. Awesome.
It's interesting because there is definitely there's a methodology to being able to do that like seamlessly, and I rely a lot on humor, as corny as it may be. If I found it humorous, I'd say it. I blurt it out. And a lot of times, like, and my approach was different. Say I had a group of guys versus a group of girls that come in. Like when guys came in, one of the things I would do, I'd target one of the guys and clown him, make his friends laugh and the whole nine. But everybody's having a good time about it, and I'd end up getting good sales with that. So that was fun.
See, that's perfect.
Yeah,
it's got to get them to like you, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and the only way to really do that is to show your genuine self.
You're right.
People pick up on that for sure.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So you joined the Army 1990.
Yeah.
What'd you start out as? What did you want to be?
Okay. So, I had not really considered, I didn't really want to go into the Army for whatever, but my son was on the way. And I was like, hey, I have to go back to school. I have to go to college and be able to take care of this kid, take care of my family. And so, all those be all you can be commercials were resonating, and
Yeah.
especially the money for school aspect. So I joined, and I remember, and one really funny thing is the day I graduated from basic training was the day Iraq invaded Kuwait, August 2nd, 1990.
Wow.
So the funny thing that I really remember about that whole thing was during basic training, you'd hear drill sergeants yelling, "Damn it, privates, you better learn this. If we go to war, you're going to wish you paid attention." And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, who are we going to war with? Never ask those type questions, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because wow.
Yeah,
That's good.
right.
That's a good memory, though. The drill
Yeah,
sergeants have a
absolutely.
tendency to making you remember. That's
Right.
for sure. And then, where did you head to AIT? What was your job?
Okay. So
How's all that?
AIT, I went to Fort Gordon, and my initial MOS was 29 Sierra, which was a ComSec equipment repair. And after I graduated from AIT, I got sent over to Berlin. I was stationed in Berlin. Loved that. That really changed my life in some profound ways, and actually led me into the entertainment field. Ironically enough.
Right.
So yeah, I got to the Berlin Brigade, and I really like the 29 Sierra, the ComSec equipment. Like those guys are stuck in a vault and working on equipment, and honestly, that's really not my personality type. I ended up working in the unit's training office initially, and that was great because working for training, I scheduled people for PLDC, BNOC, ANOC, things like that. But I also got to train soldiers on a lot of I forget what did we call it at the time, but just teaching people how to like to do claymore, set up
Yeah.
training, go to rifle range, and all that
Right.
good. And I led special fitness for our unit. So any soldiers that didn't meet the standards for PT, then I whipped them into shape.
Hey, man,
So
that's a
yeah,
big
so
job.
I really enjoyed that aspect, especially training. That was a lot of fun. And from doing that, then like as the downsizing started happening in around 90, like late 92, early 93, then I was assigned to the brigade's headquarters detachment, and I was like doing in processing of new soldiers and their family members. I pick them up, bring them to different billeting locations,
Right.
and get them acquainted with Berlin Brigade, basically. And I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that. So
Wow. So you took us where I wanted you to go, which is great. So Berlin, changing of your goals, dreams, aspirations, and entertainment, right?
right.
Share with us how that transpired. I've heard the story, but our listeners
Right.
need to hear it because it's a great story.
Yeah, it's really intriguing.
Yeah. So
So with Berlin, when I first got to Berlin, I remember when I first hit Berlin soil. My buddies from AIT were stationed there already,
yeah.
and then we were hitting the club scene. They were like, "Come on out." So I remember the first time like going to certain clubs, and like at the time, back when I was in my slim trim 20s, I was getting approached by people like, "Are you in the army? You should be in GQ." And I was hearing that kind of stuff a lot every time I was going out. And so I drank the Kool-Aid. So I started
Good way to
thinking,
put
hey,
it.
I should be in GQ. Hey, I have that look. So so I bought into it. And I remember I found out about this fashion show on Post. And so I did the fashion show. And one of my buddies that was stationed in Berlin with me, he was an army photographer. That was his actual job. And Bo, you know him. You guys
Yeah.
worked together at the White House.
Yeah. It's
Guys
a small world.
go lightly. So he came to the fashion show, this one fashion show I had done on Post. And I'll never forget because prior to walking out on that stage, I was so nervous. Like I had done fashion shows when I was a little kid. My great grandmother was a fashion designer, and she had her own, like she was a seamstress. So she would throw like this big fashion show, every year. So she had me model, I guess, like when I was like 8 and 9 years old. And I remember, so I hadn't done that since I was like 9 years old. So I remember being backstage before hitting that stage. I was so nervous. My knee was shaking. I put my hand on my knee to physically stop it, and it just kept shaking. I was like, oh man, what am I doing? And as soon as I hit the stage and, I got some good response from the audience, and that emboldened me. And then I just like internalize that and like just have fun out on the stage from there. But Bobby Golightly, he took pictures of me, right?
Yeah.
And he only gave me one particular shot, and he blew it up like really huge, probably like I don't know, 11 by 14, maybe a little bigger. And it was me in this robe, and I had the robe open like at the foot of the stage, right?
Yeah.
So I remember I'm watching TV late one night and watching Armed Forces Network, where we weren't allowed to have we weren't allowed to have TV commercials, traditional commercials. So during commercial breaks for shows, of course, they'd show public service announcements or community bulletin boards. So one night I'm watching late, and I see this bulletin board. Are you an actor, singer, dancer, model? The Berlin American Casting Agency is looking for you. And I remember like perking up like, what? And I go and grab a pen really quickly, and I wrote down the little phone number for this Berlin American Casting Agency. And so I called the next day and I set up an appointment. And I remember going to the office and meeting with this agent. And I was telling him, yeah, I want to model. And at first, I remember the guy was just totally blowing me off. Okay, yeah, you want to model, whatever. Obviously, he wasn't seeing it. And I was like, well, I have a picture from my fashion show. So I pulled out that picture that Bobby had taken, and I showed it to the guy, and his demeanor completely changed. Like he perks up, and he's like, would you mind if we make copies of this? And I was like, sure, go ahead. So he comes back in the office about 5 minutes later. He said, I showed your picture around. We think we can book you a lot of work. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And so he calls me about a week later and he says, Tony, I know you said you wanted to model, but how'd you feel about being in the movie?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that would be really cool. So I'm thinking maybe I'm in the background, so I didn't even know the term they call those extras. I was so green to the industry. And ultimately he set up a meeting, and it was supposed to be I guess an audition, an initial audition. And the film I found out was being directed by an Academy Award-winning director. His name was John Schlesinger. He did Midnight Cowboy. That's what he won the Academy Award for. But he also directed like Marathon Man. Like he was very prominent. And the film was going to be starring Anthony Hopkins. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and at that time, Silence of the Lambs was out, and getting all the buzz about the Oscars and the whole nine. So the agent had gotten together about 7 of us all together, and it was so funny because like as we're all together, like different people were talking about what they had done in the industry. And I had done nothing. And I'll never forget a good buddy of mine to this day. He actually just retired just a couple of years ago as a full bird colonel, my buddy Arnold. And I remember him saying, yeah, I was an extra in Madonna's Truth or Dare video. And like, that was big stuff. I was like, whoa, wow. I'm feeling like very out of place and overwhelmed, right? Wow. And so the agent tells us before we all load into this van to go to this hotel in Berlin. He was like, "So what I think's going to happen is there's going to be the casting director and the first assistant director. I don't believe that John Schlesinger is going to be there. So he's prepping us for this." And we get to this hotel and we go into this conference room, and there are three people sitting at the table, one of whom was actually John Schlesinger, the actual director. So John Schlesinger is going down the line, and I forgot to tell you, I bought this gaudy white blazer. It was a blazer, but instead of buttons, it had zippers with like a little metal tassel hanging. And I hated the blazer, but I just got it because I felt like I needed to be dressed up in a blazer, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of feeling like, Michael Jackson on an audition or something. I don't know.
Wow. I can picture it.
So Schlesinger's going like down the line, and I'm sitting at like the far end of the group. He started on the opposite end, fortunately, and people were telling him what they had done, and he's fully aware that we're all soldiers, and he's really into this whole thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So by the time he gets to me, and I think I'm probably sweating bullets at the time, like, oh my God, what am I going to say? I haven't done anything, right?
Yeah.
And so the agent like jumps in and he's like, as you can see, everybody here has done community theater or theater in college, and they've done extra work. So Schlesinger, he let me off the hook. It was great. And Schlesinger was like, okay, guys, we're having a big cattle call in a couple of weekends. And he tells the agent, I want you to bring me more Americans. All right. So we got to the cattle call a couple of weeks later. And there were hundreds of people there trying to be famous, everyone. And they broke us up into like groups of like 15. And so, my group was somewhere in the middle. But by the time they called us in, the setup was kind of the same with the director, casting director, first assistant director sitting behind their table. So John Schlesinger directs us. He's like, okay, guys, here's what's going to happen. This is taking place in the 1950s in Berlin. Because the film was a period piece. And he was like, you guys are in a cantina. You're all having a good time partying. I want you four guys, you'll be card players. And I was one of the card players, right? So he's setting the scene up. And he was like, okay, you guys over here, you're dancing around, you're having fun. And then he points to two guys. He was like, okay, you two guys, you're going to be on the phone hogging the phone. You're going to get pissed off at him that he's hogging the phone, and I want you guys to get into a fight. So he yells, action. So we have to improvise. So I'm acting like playing cards, and I'm thinking like, okay, man, I have to stand out here. I want to be in this movie. And so these guys, they get really serious and they start rolling around on the ground together. Like, they have all this energy happening. The focus is on them. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have to stand out. So when they got close to me, I just acted like they bumped into me and made me spill a drink on myself. And then I just, I got up, get your stupid ass up. And I'm grabbing the guys and breaking up the fight and the whole nine. And Schlesinger had these other two guys come in and act like they were military police. And they come in, okay, guys, what's going on? I'm like, hey, we're all partying. We're having a good time. And I just went in that little zone and made it real. And so Schlesinger, he yells cut and he stands up clapping, and his two colleagues stand up and they're clapping. And he's looking at me and he has this weird little smile on his face, like he has a discovery here. So right then I knew, like, yeah, I'm going to be working in this film. But he put me through the paces. He had me reenact some other little scenes, but I was firing on all cylinders, and I booked the job. So about a month after Hopkins won his Academy Award, then I'm on set with Anthony Hopkins, working with him. It was great.
Yeah. Wow. That's just unreal. But when I listen, Luke, when I listen to Tony with that story, right? There's so much that you can pull out of that. And even though it's his journey, but people listening, he said yes, right? You never know what opportunity is going to come or when it's going to come. Right. And here it was, Tony, it's staring you in the face, and you could have easily walked away. or said, no, I'd never get that, right? Or if you didn't have the confidence or whatever, it's like that I have no chance at that. I'm going to do, I'm a soldier or whatever, right?
Right.
And but that's not what you did, right? You said yes, you went after it. Everything's unknown to you,
Right.
right? That's your first, all new stuff.
Right.
But you went after it and you followed through, which I think is a great moral to the story. It's the perseverance, right? And the wherewithal to say, I got to get this part. I got to stand out.
Right.
That's like it's like business. You got to be different. You have to have differentiators. You got to stand out amongst your competition, and you recognize that, and that's just awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, and I have a weird question now. So the fashion show that you started at the beginning of the story,
right?
Is this what I was picturing in my mind is like this? You're in like an army tent. There's a bunch of guys in fatigues. There's like a stage set up. And you're doing like a fashion show? That's not what happened?
That's not what happened. But thank you for asking about that. That's actually funny. The Berlin Brigade was probably the most spoiled brigade in U.S. Army history. There was a lot of money being pumped into the Berlin Brigade by the German government, the West German government, and the city of Berlin. Being that it was so important during the Cold War to make sure Berlin was, solid and protected from Soviet aggression.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So we had like perks in Berlin that were just amazing. It was so crazy. I'm embarrassed actually, like how good that duty assignment was. It truly was. It was great. So the organization that put on the fashion show was an organization called Sisters of the Evening Star. I guess they're a component with the Masons. And so they rented a hall, and and it was really nicely done. I think it was a Mother's Day fashion show or something. So
that's I'm glad you clarified that. I had something totally different going on in my mind, and I was like about to ask. I was like, Bo, did they do this at your bases you're at? Like I'm picturing like a drill sergeant's cool with it. Like my mind was like do all militaries do this? Like what if the Navy SEALs busted in on Bin Laden and they're having a fashion show?
I have to be honest. I don't remember seeing a single fashion show in 20 plus years on active duty.
Berlin was a completely different kind of place. It truly was.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Different levels. And like, I guess the way the Berlin American Casting Agency came into being, I'm not sure exactly. It must have been like the people that bring like singers and comedians to entertain the troops.
Yeah.
I think it must have been funneled or funded through that like entity somehow. But what was happening? So when I first got to Berlin, it was about 14 months after the wall came down. So after the wall came down, for the first time in like 30 some odd years, production companies were able to go into the former east of Berlin. So they were hitting the city really hard, lots of productions. And then the productions would call the U.S. consulate and say, hey, we need Americans, for a lot of these roles. And that was happening a lot. And the consulate in turn would call the Army, and they'd also call the Air Force, which was still going strong in Berlin, and asking if there were any soldiers or airmen that wanted to participate in these films or TV shows or whatever it was.
Wow.
So that was happening enough, and that created a catalyst for having the Berlin American Casting Agency, the only place in the world that, something like that exists as far as I know.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing. What an iconic place and time to be as well.
Yeah.
In Berlin during that time period.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. It was truly amazing. And like just, and I definitely had a sense of history at that time and knowing where I was and what I was kind of around and paying attention to. And just from a soldierly aspect, the thing that really stands out the most to me, I'll never forget like waking up one morning, getting my stars and stripes, off the front of my doorstep, and looking at Stars and Stripes and seeing the headline about Gorbachev being like put under house arrest during the coup attempt. And
Wow.
like, that was just like scary to me. Like, man, this is crazy.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by Russians right now.
Yeah, I
And,
bet.
yeah, so seeing that and being a part of that, and then when we were actually on set filming the movie, we had some Russian soldiers in the movie as well. Like that was a
No
very
kidding.
crazy thing. John Schlesinger had actually he had set up with like their top general and of the Russian troops that
Yeah.
they would be a part of the filming. And then all of a sudden, the guy, like, says no, he's not going to let any of his troops go. But somehow Schlesinger's people had been in touch with this group of Russian soldiers that really wanted to do it. And they hid out in the forest somewhere, and he sent a bus to pick them up and bring them on set.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
never forget that day. That was like a really interesting day. Like not a lot of Russians knew how to speak English, and I guess two of their young officers knew how to speak English, so they come and talk to everybody. And I remember they came up to me and they were like, "Where are your friends?" I'm like, "All these are my friends. What are you talking about?" But I was like the only black guy on the set.
Wow.
And then I remember there was also this little short Russian guy, like, and he was short, but my God, this guy was ripped. He was like just so muscular, and like, and he's just staring at me like glaring, like, and I'm sitting there thinking, all right, I'm gonna have to whoop his ass a little
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the end of the day, the guy comes up to me and like with a big smile on his face and extended his hand for a handshake. So it was just it was a funny experience.
Isn't that wild? Totally wild.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a really cool. I think it's just awesome that you have that piece of history, even what's happening in Berlin, to tie your story to. Like,
Right.
and when it was all kind of going down for you and getting this jumpstart for entertainment industry, and it's around that time frame and what was going on
Right.
in Berlin and in Germany. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did it go? How did it go from there? So that was your introduction,
Right.
from fashion show to straight to Academy Award winning, Oscar winning, director and actor,
Right.
to the journey that you've had over the past 20 years, 20 plus years.
Yeah, 20 plus.
Yeah, doing other films and jumping from acting to producing.
Right.
Yeah, so you obviously kept following that path.
Yeah. So prior to me PCSing or leaving Berlin, and I was going to reclass. I became an 11 Mike,
Yeah.
and what led me to Colorado Springs and Fort Carson.
Uh-huh.
So, but prior to leaving Berlin, I had an audition for this short film, and I landed the lead role in this short film. And they had high aspirations for it. Like they definitely wanted to submit to like the huge film festivals like Cannes, and so. But I was leaving. I was PCSing and going to training at Fort Benning. So I tried to get a waiver to be able to come and shoot that film because we had been doing some rehearsals, but Uncle Sam said no, that wasn't happening. So
As he
like,
does.
yeah, so
As
I
he
was
does.
pretty bummed about that opportunity. Like, oh man, I really wanted that role,
Yeah.
but the actor wants every role. So
Yeah, I bet.
And so after I left there and I got stationed at Fort Carson, where me and Bo linked up and we were in the same unit, I continued my pursuit of the industry. And I found out about this model search competition that was happening. And I entered that model search competition. I took first place in that. And they actually sent me out to LA for this big national competition. And out here in LA, I met some interesting people. And, people were definitely showing a lot of interest out in LA. But
Nice.
I didn't, I went back to Colorado once I left Colorado. I moved to Milwaukee, which, was where my ex-wife is from,
Mm-hmm.
and continued to pursue the industry in Milwaukee. But I had some interesting things happen from there. Like the producers of The Innocent,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to meet with me out in New York, and they were. I had gotten friendly with some of the people behind the scenes while I
Yeah.
was working on The Innocent. And so there was a TV show at the time on Fox called America Undercover, or
Uh-huh.
what? Not wait, what was the name of that?
America's
Not
Most Wanted.
not America's Most Wanted. Starred Malik Yoba, but it was this crime drama that
Okay.
they New York Undercover. That's
New
that
York
was
Undercover. Got it.
so I was supposed to meet with the casting director for New York Undercover, one of the producers' wives. Like she
Mm-hmm.
was good friends with the casting director. So I went out to meet with her and then to meet with the casting director as well. So it was funny when I first got to New York, and this was my first time ever going to New York. I'll never forget this. I get in this taxi, and I was staying in some bed and breakfast that was in Manhattan, right off of Broadway. It was called the Broadway Bed and Breakfast, and so I'm talking to this cab driver, and I'll never forget this conversation with this guy. He was an Egyptian guy. I'm like asking where he's from. He's telling me Egypt. And so I remember talking to the guy, and I'm like, what do you think of Netanyahu being elected, as prime minister of Israel? Because that's when he was first elected. This was what, I guess, 96. And so this guy got really passionate about that subject. And I'm gonna tie this down in a second with the story because it was interesting. And I remember the guy telling me, I think the Arab nations are now going to unify and the leaders are going to show some backbone. And, he's all super passionate about this. And he ended the conversation like saying, something very ominous. He was like, yeah, the world will see very soon. Like, so I'm like, okay, all right, whatever that means. And when we get to Times Square, I see this huge amount of people and music blaring really loud.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, almost 1 a.m. I'm like, what in the world is going on here? And I remember the cab driver saying, oh, somebody's dancing or something, So I go check into my hotel, my bed and breakfast, check into that room. And I head back over. I'm very curious what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're shooting a music video, and there I saw Notorious B.I.G. and Puffy, and
Uh-huh.
it was Group 112.
What?
They were shooting a music video for 112, and I'm like, oh my god, really?
Yeah.
So I run back to my hotel room, and I call my ex-wife, and I wake her up, and I'm like, I just saw Biggie, she's like, whatever. She's tired, she's mad at me, and hangs up, right? So I grab my headshot and I go back over there and I wait until the video is over. And once
No
the
kidding.
music video has been done shot, I people were heading up to Biggie and Puffy and all those guys, like getting
Uh-huh.
and meeting them and that whole nine. But I went over to the director and
Ah.
and I showed him my headshot and resume. I was like, I'm an actor. I'm out here meeting with the casting director for New York Undercover tomorrow, but I definitely want to be considered for anything that you're shooting in the future. And he asked me to step back, and he looks me up and down, looks at my headshot. He's like, what are you doing this weekend? I have a Key Sweat music video I'm shooting.
No way.
Yeah, he said that. And I remember
Stop it.
I was like, well, I'm supposed to fly out tomorrow after my meetings, but, if the money's right, I'll stick around. I'll do this music video. And he was like, well, the money's not that much on this one, but I'll tell you what, I'll keep you on file. And when I have something, I'll definitely reach out to you. So, the next day I met with the casting director and, I had all my meetings and I hit the plane back to Milwaukee. When I land in Milwaukee and, I hop in the cab to go home, the taxi driver is, where are you coming from? And I said, well, I'm just getting back from New York. He was like, oh, you left just in time, huh? And I'm like, just in time for what? He's like, oh, you didn't hear about it? He was like, there was a plane that just blew up in, like right over the Hudson. And that was that TWA flight,
Yeah. Wow.
And I remember initially hearing the people saying they saw like a launch from like the Hudson Bay or whatever.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I thought about what that cab driver had said, his ominous prediction, and that just freaked me out.
Oh, I would be freaked out too, for sure. Wow.
People still talk about that.
Right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was really crazy.
Super crazy. You know, we had a similar that's another great point. And this is what I love about doing this show, because people make really good, just through your story, really good points that are very helpful to our listeners. One of our previous guests was a Olympian for Jamaica. Okay. She was 2008 Summer Games in China. Usain Bolt was one of her teammates. Her name's Zara Northover. She's a shot putter, but now today she's like a elite mortgage banker for Quicken Loans, right? Wow. So this is post Olympics, all that kind of stuff. But she like applied to Quicken Loans. What'd she say, Luke? Like 100 times, right?
Yeah.
She was just so persistent, and you know what got her the job?
What's that?
She was in Detroit, because that's where their headquarters was, and she saw the CEO of Quicken Loans walking down the sidewalk, and she went and approached him and said, you need someone like me, or I want to work in your company. I've been going at it, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at her and said, we really need someone like you with your energy in this company. And she's been there for 12 years or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chased him down on the street.
So that is a behavior or just someone's character to recognize, like, I'm going after this, like you going back to it. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Most people would have been, man, I got to go to bed. But you saw an opportunity, and it wasn't just go check it out. It's like, I'm grabbing my headshot. I'm going back. I don't need to meet Biggie or Puffy. I need to meet the director, because he's got authority, right? And wait, and just wait for that opportunity. Man, that's I don't even know what to say. That is just, I mean, it's incredible for someone to have that much just excitement, ambition, to go after it when the opportunity is presenting itself.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had never been one, to just kind of wait for somebody to bring me an opportunity. I was always thinking, what can I do to further my career? What do I need to do to get my foot in the door? And and I've throughout my career pursuit, I've taken some very audacious steps, like from very end. Like, my inspiration has always been very obscure. I remember for one Mother's Day, I guess I got my ex-wife. I think I got her some like diamond earrings, but I also bought her a CD from Queen Latifah. She liked Queen Latifah, I guess, or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I remember one time I was just like looking through Queen Latifah, like through the Queen Latifah CD, and reading the liner notes on the CD. And, I saw she had a production company. It was called Flavor Unit Management. So I remember I copied down the address and or somehow I found the address, but I wrote down the name of Flavor Unit Management and the person that was associated. And I wrote a letter and sent my headshot in to the company in New York. And I was like, hey, I'm an actor. I'm looking for some representation. And they contacted me, and they were like, well, we have an office on the West Coast that specializes in helping actors. And at the time I had what's called a demo reel with a lot of clips from the different things that I had been in. I'd done, like, aside from the movie with Anthony Hopkins, I had done some short films, like student films for college students that were studying filmmaking in Chicago at Columbia College. I had also done like commercials, like up in Milwaukee. So like my whole demo. And I had done this short film, actually, that was a comedy that I played the lead in. And that was funny because I almost said no to that opportunity, because I don't particularly find myself being a funny guy, but
Gotcha.
So I sent this demo reel to Queen Latifah's company. They put me in contact with the office on the West Coast. I flew out here, met with them, and they wanted to represent me. And but at the time, I didn't move to LA. My ex-wife didn't want to move to LA, and I was trying to keep the marriage together. So I didn't take that opportunity, but I did create an opportunity to like meet these people, and
Sure.
a very proactive thing.
Yeah.
Another proactive thing I've done that turned out to be like a really funny, like, story or interesting was when I moved out to LA. I guess this was shortly after 9/11, and I was watching some award show, and seeing the award show, like every time like a woman like won an award, you'd have some guy in a tuxedo walk her out to the stage or walk her from receiving her award back to the back, and
Sure.
and vice versa. If some guy won, then some pretty lady in a gown would come out and escort him backstage. And I was like, I want to do that. So I watched the credits and I wrote down the name of the production company and I sent my headshot to that production company. They got back to me and they were like, we want you. And at this time, Alicia Keys had just come out, and like she's just blown up, winning all these different awards. So there was one award show. They were like, "We want you to escort Alicia Keys." And
Really?
yeah, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, so they, and I remember one of the casting directors, "You guys will make a cute couple." Yeah, and they were like, usually somebody with no experience, we never put with somebody that's high profile, but they put me with Alicia Keys. And she was a great person. It was really funny. I remember when I first met her, I introduced myself and told her I'd be escorting her around during the show. And she's like, "How you doing, brother?" I'm like, "I'm hungry as hell. You got some food?" And she started laughing. And but from that opportunity, because she was the golden child, like everywhere we were going, people thought that I really knew her, and people were running up and giving me business cards, and that actually started my progression towards becoming a producer, like that particular instance.
Amazing. Yeah, I saw her one time. I was standing at the Secret Service guard shack, if you will, in DC, waiting to go into the White House with some guests that I was taking in to show them around. And this black SUV pulls up, and driver jumps out and opens the side door, and it was Alicia Keys with her kids, and they were going in. So they stood there with us to get through. Everybody's got to go through security, regardless of who you are. So she stood there with us to go through security because she was having. She was going in to meet with the Obamas, whatever social event, who knows? But I'm like, oh, that's Alicia Keys. That's cool.
Right.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah,
so you both have pseudo like escorted Alicia Keys.
Right,
like this is a connection here that I didn't know we had before.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So
I don't have any Alicia Keys stories. Sorry, guys.
None?
But I love her music.
There we go.
But what I love from this though is, man, you're not waiting for any opportunity in your life. You're going to get it.
Right.
I'm surprised you're not the founder of like LinkedIn, because you're like the serious networker prior to smartphones and all of that stuff and social media existing. Like you knew somehow that. I just find that's just unreal, because you knew exactly, like you weren't waiting for a job, to come out, and then back then is what, a newspaper where the jobs were advertised, right? You were going, you kind of knew what to watch for, go straight for the players or the decision makers that could actually act upon your letter, right? You're mailing them a letter.
And it was surprising how effective that was. Like, I don't think a lot of people did that kind of thing, but it was just something in me. Like I'm not waiting for any agents to, and it's crazy because like of any agents that really did that, promoted me a lot, the guy from the Berlin American Casting Agency, he definitely promoted me a lot, because I'd be in different situations and I'd meet people and say my name and they'd be like, "I heard of you," and I'd be like really surprised. "How'd you hear about me?" Well, it was my agent talking about me, and talking me up. But outside of that, I've never had an agent like that since.
Gotcha. Yeah, not all created equal, are they?
Right, exactly.
They're not. So Tony, take us from the jump from acting to jumping on to the producer side.
Producing, right.
Yeah, to producing. Definitely different parts of the, behind the camera versus in front of the camera,
Right.
and guiding, and I don't even know what's the difference between the producer and tell us, what's a producer do versus the director?
Okay, so basically, a producer, if you look at each film, like each film is like its own company, especially in the independent world, which is what I've been operating in primarily. And producer is the executive core,
Gotcha.
On a film, the producer is the top of the hierarchy. And then you have different levels of producer. Then you have an executive producer. Executive producer is usually associated with getting money into the project. You have co-producers and associate producers and whole nine. And basically, a producer brings together entities that make the film happen. Now, sometimes the producers will come up with an idea and hire a writer to like create that idea. Sometimes a producer like is approached by writers or comes across something that's been written, or sometimes the writer will be a producer and have those producer skill sets. But the producer's job is first of all to make sure they really understand that project and what's going to be needed to make that project happen. And then you have to crew up. You have to hire all the right people, the key people to make that happen, to manage money properly, make sure you're not going over budget or any, and but the director. So basically, in the movie world, I'll say it's like kind of making a dish where, like the producer, I gather all the ingredients. The director is the one that has to cook, has to put those ingredients together, and
Gotcha.
they realize that vision. So, it's a weird kind of thing that as a producer, then you take the backseat to the director once the production actually begins, and the director becomes like the shot caller, if you would. But the producer, then you fill in the role to make sure the director has what he or she needs to get that film made. But they are still beholden to the producer as well, as making sure that you're on the same sheet of music with how the vision for this project goes. And a good producer will definitely have a lot of creative input and bringing like all the elements that go. But it's something that really, what's crucial is that there's respect between producer, director, and ultimately, I think respect needs to be afforded to everybody on that crew, everybody on that set. So,
yeah, no, that's it. That's awesome.
And filmmaking should be collaborative, but once filming begins, like I think it's super, super important that I'm always backing the director. and not letting anybody challenge the director or or supersede what their authority is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that gave me a different picture of the actual inner workings of getting a movie done. You're explaining it just like business, right? It's an organization, it's an entity, all these moving parts, all these people, support, whatever, have to all come together to get it done. And you need leadership, you need business acumen, you need project management, you need all those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say the project management, because recently I just got PMP certified because
I saw that.
That's what that is. It's project management. And, I just felt like that can even sharpen my skills as a producer. Yeah. That's why I went and got that done. So, yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations. That's a big thing.
Yeah. Congrats. There's so much in life that project management can help with, I feel like, especially getting that PMP certification.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything I do in life is just basically project management. I feel like
it is. That's why I got it. And I thought, even on the HR front for me, right? Because there are so many things that happen that are projects, right? They're temporary. They're from, they have a start and an end. You need all this stuff to happen in between. And if you have that project management, well, number one, if you have the certification, it means you've done the job, you have the skills, you have the chops, you understand it, and you know how to execute it. It can make your life, when you have that understanding, it can make your life a whole lot easier when you're in those roles and you kind of know how to put things together and actually get it from beginning to end. Because if you can't execute it, it's all for naught, right?
Yeah. It's funny, when I was in my course, I remember, like, my fellow cohorts, they were like, "Man, you're a professional. You know this stuff already." Like, I've been living it. I've been doing it. Every film is a project. We talk about films, especially like in production phase. We call it a project, a film project.
Sure.
So it's definitively a project. Has a very specific beginning, middle, and end date.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, because you're connecting the dots for a lot of people listening.
Right.
It's not all glitz and glamour. There's a lot of hard work.
This would be the perfect place to plug a PMP certification company, Bo.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, like 360training.com.
Right.
Go to the BoandLukeShow.com affiliates and sponsors and click on 360training.com. Sign up.
Right.
Yeah, /PMP, and make sure to mention Bo and Luke.
Right.
That's right. So, Tony, any parting thoughts to everyone listening? Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, absolutely. So my big takeaway and my life experiences, and actually it's funny because one of my fellow soldiers that was in that movie with me, the Anthony Hopkins movie, it's called The Innocent. His name is Mark Valley. He's actually a very successful actor. He's had a couple of series that he was the lead in on Fox. And he was also in Boston Legal, I believe. Like, he was one of the principal characters. He was like one of Time Magazine's top 50 sexiest people in that edition.
Wow.
But he's had some tremendous success. But once he left Berlin, he sent me a letter, and I'll never forget the letter, like just telling me things that I needed to do if I was serious about being in the business. And one of the things that stood out the most to me that he said was, "Don't be afraid to ask for anything you need. Like, anything you want, just ask. You never know. Like, if you don't ask, you won't get the opportunity. But ask." And I took that to heart, and it's opened up an enormous amount of doors for me, and moved my career in the direction that it needed to go. So
awesome. That is fantastic.
Clearly it did.
Yeah.
Tony, this has been awesome. What a pleasure having you on.
It's been my pleasure. I'm very honored to be on the show. I've taken a look at some episodes or listened to some of the episodes, and you guys have some tremendous guests. And I was just hoping that that I wouldn't bring the caliber of the guests.
Oh,
down.
no way.
No, you elevated it. And in fact, if I can return the favor, if you're ever looking for like an actor that's like late 30s,
Right.
5'8", on a good day, about 220 pounds. So, not incredibly fit, but has a good, dad bod going on type thing, then I'm available.
Thank you for that, because, most of the people you see on screen are not the Brad Pitts,
That's right.
Yeah, Luke,
I'm very affordable as well. So,
Luke wants to play. Luke wants to play one of the drill sergeants when you turn my book into a movie. He'll play one of the drill sergeants.
All right.
Yelling at Private Bravo.
Some of the most intimidating drill sergeants were like below 5'11".
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember. I had one. Did you? I had one just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any spots open at the remaking of the Berlin Brigade, I'd like to be in that film.
I would love to shoot back in Berlin, like so many years later, going back and
Without further ado, man, I think you need to tell us that's a wrap.
All right. I was made for this. That's a wrap.